You know, something about the 6th generation of consoles has always interested me. I'm not really sure why. Maybe it's because at the time it was very interesting to see the jump from what was very primitive 3D to when I would say they probably mostly mastered 3D just before that HD era. We were even playing HD games back before it became the norm with the 360. Both the GameCube, the PS2, and the Xbox, all three of them were able to go up to at least 720p in a lot of games. Not everyone, but a lot of them. Even games like Gran Turismo managed to get up 1080 on the PS2, which is very impressive. But something about the GameCube, and I've never really been able to figure out why. Maybe it's the small form factor. Maybe it's because this is the last time Nintendo competed at a power standpoint. But there is a lot of technology built into what is a very small form factor. It's always been very interesting to take a look at this thing. I also have a lot of fond memories. Some of you guys maybe watched my video where I kind of reminisced and talked about it, but I figured today, I got this from that mom and pop shop that I covered on that one video. I figured today we'll take it apart so you guys can see really some of the great engineering that went into this little system. And hey, it even has a handle, so you know, that's something. Oh, and before we start, you're mostly just gonna need Phillips head screwdrivers, but to get into the system, you're going to need a certain bit. See, Nintendo, they didn't really use Phillips heads to get into the system as opposed to something like the PS2. Even the Xbox used the more traditional at the time Torx driver that you could go buy at your Home Depot. But Nintendo used something different. They used something called the Game Bit. You may have remembered this from the Nintendo 64 or even the Super Nintendo cartridges. They were kind of there to act as a security bit, essentially. It was something that was hard to get. At least then it was. It's a little easier to get now. See, you want to go online and you want to get in this case, a 3.8 millimeter and a 4.5 millimeter. And these are on Amazon. There is this interesting trick people use where they melt a pen. These are $7. So we don't really need to bring fire into the equation here. In fact, if you've thought about it, just smash your pen now and throw your lighter out outside, because just go on Amazon and get that. I'll even leave a link to you guys down. If you really want to open, this will work for Super Nintendo games, for example. This will work for your GameCube, your Nintendo 64. If you really need to open them for modifications or cleaning, just play it safe. Buy these. They're very durable. They'll last you forever as long as you don't lose them like I always seem to. Now, before we open the GameCube, I wanted to quickly go over some of the chips we'll be on the lookout for. Nintendo had the codename Dolphin in place for the GameCube, and that even trickled down to the name for the GPU, called Flipper. This GPU was fairly impressive at the time, boasting advanced lighting techniques that put it above the PS2, but below the Xbox in terms of raw power. The CPU was codenamed Gecko and was based on the 750 CXE PowerPC chip that was also found in the Apple G3 at the time. The CPU found in the GameCube was evolved and changed as time went on, with the Wii U CPU even being based in the same family. All of this is aided with 43 megabytes of total RAM, with 24 megabytes used for system memory, 3 megabytes used for the GPU, and 16 megabytes used as an I/O buffer for the audio and DVD drive. All right, I got you guys up here. We're probably gonna get another camera soon so you can have an angle up here and over here. So in the next couple teardown videos, hopefully I'll have it by then. I was trying to hold off until then, but you know what? I wanted to open this GameCube, so we can go through it. Now the GameCube had reset, power, and an open button. This one always seemed to get stuck with all kinds of gunk and stuff. And inside, it's an exposed laser there, something again, the other systems did not have. The PS2 and Xbox actually had closed, well, until the PS2 went to a slim, in this case slim design, where the laser, the eye was actually exposed. On the bottom, several different ports for things like the broadband modem adapter, and it also had a Game Boy player that I actually have over there. I actually ordered it for a review that's coming up that we're going to be doing. But it had a lot of expansion ports on the bottom that they actually used, not like the 64 where they used it for like the disk drive that only came out in Japan. Those were actually used even in the US, which is great. So we're going to start by opening this guy up on the bottom. 4 Game Bit screws, that's where everyone would melt those pens, but this just clicks right in, good grip, pops right out. So you don't have to worry about that with these guys. We're going to go ahead and get these 4 out, and then we should be able to take the top of the GameCube off. Also, just go ahead and grab these covers off as well. Now, if you are to a point where this, any of them are stuck, usually the power button is one that doesn't usually get stuck because it's spring-loaded. But if, for example, the open button gets stuck, which it happens a lot, you only have to take those 4 Game Bit screws out, and you can actually get directly to it. I'm going to put this aside. You can actually get right to that open button right there. This one isn't stuck, but I might want to just clean it anyway. The reset button tends to get stuck as well in here. But that actually just comes off. There are basically tabs here that pinch, and then you can actually pop the reset button out the other way. Just give it a nice little push, and you can clean it from there. So just keep that in mind if you need to. It's not the worst thing in the world to clean this. Just maybe take this, drop it in some soap and water, get a Q-tip with some soap and water and alcohol. Just kind of, just wipe in there, and then you can just pop this directly back in. It pretty much just pushes, and you just kind of push it right in like that. So pretty easy. And the other ones are the same way. The open button's a little weirder because there's a mechanism. You actually have to take 2 screws out to get to it. But all of that is cleanable with just 4 screws for the Mac, the system overall coming out. So we have some stuff we can start taking out right away, like the fan, for example, is exposed pretty much straight off the bat. So we can actually take that fan out with a couple screws here, just start making room to get around everything. The fan in this case was actually a blower fan that would pull air out, and we would actually get a nice airflow through this system with the heatsink on the bottom. And it worked well enough. The GameCube wasn't a very loud system, which was great, because while the Xbox wouldn't get super loud, it would still kind of be audible. The PS2 was definitely audible as well, but the GameCube, if you had one, you're going to pretty much remember exactly this. It really wasn't that loud most times, which was really cool. So we have this. It is also attached to the power supply in the back. Be careful with that, please. Don't get too familiar with that, but there's our fan assembly there with the fan. You can also technically take some compressed air to this and just clean it out if you're looking to really clean the system up. Put that to the side with those 2 screws. So we now have access to the side here with more screws. This system has a lot of screws in it. We have some there, some on this side, and that is steel, so don't run your finger across it like that because you will cut it. So let's start taking all the screws out that we can, and there's quite a few, so we're going to be rolling through this for a little bit. So we got those screws off the front as well, and you're going to see the whole controller board is interesting. It kind of reminds me a bit of, if I remember right, the Dreamcast one, but it actually plugs directly in, and it has our CMOS battery for keeping the time. You can see that here. This can go bad, and believe it or not, what's really funny is now that I'm looking at this, it kind of reminds me of the Super Nintendo game battery. So I wonder if you could just replace it with a standard one of those. This might be a C2025 maybe. Or maybe a 2032, and you could just solder them in. But yeah, even the board, it looks very familiar as to Nintendo's Super Nintendo boards, believe it or not. It's pretty funny. The entire front, so if you have like broken ports, is modular. So you could technically just buy a whole one of these and replace it if that's what you want to go with, and you don't want to have broken ports. Believe it or not, as sturdy as the plugs were, people would have broken ports at times because they got a little too crazy with the adapter and everything when you go rip it off. So we got that there. That is now out. It's actually just clipped in. I did pull the screws already for this as well. I'm actually going to leave them in so I don't have to think about too much as to where those screws go, if you understand what I'm saying. That way I don't have to worry about that. So I'm actually going to put this screw. They're very long screws. They went completely through the board. So you want to make sure those go back in because they're definitely going to be holding it. And we're just going to keep working around here and taking parts out to get to that board. So I took the last screws out from the back. So basically I went all the way around and I was able to get all of the screws out. I left them kind of over here in shape because some of them are a little different in terms of sizes. Actually, no, you know what? They're all the same size. That makes life easy, I will say that. And this whole part is one unit now, so this is all going to lift up. That appears to include the drive as well. So unless you're working to replace the laser itself, this is all one piece. And if you want to get to the drive, it looks like there are smaller screws here. Now, I have a GameCube coming that has the digital port on it. I didn't have one, and I'm working on a review for something that needs it. So this entire drive is going to be used minus the board. I feel like I have to take this off, replace the board, and then I can drop it in, or just take this whole laser assembly off. The one that's coming I got very cheap because it doesn't read games. So the idea there is I will actually be able to replace it with this. This one works fine. Hopefully the boards, lasers, everything match up, and I'll be in good shape there. So here we are now with the board itself. And here's the fun thing. This is actually a pretty good heat sink on this guy. It's supposed to be aluminum. I'll have to see if there's any traces of copper in it when we actually take it off, because we are taking this off now. It looks like it's very well, in this case, cooled. We have nice steel cage there. It might be aluminum. It's definitely hard metal, which is good. And it is straightened very well. Something that the systems with, for example, in this case, the 360 was not. This appears to be supported very, very well. So let's pull this off and get a nice glimpse at the flipper GPU, for example, and see what we have going on in there. It looks like only a couple screws are holding the heatsink down. And if I'm remembering correctly, they should be using thermal pads for this. So I don't even think they were using compound at the time. This should just be a nice thermal pad that's being used to make contact, because while these chips did get, hot, they were not like how they were when we went to the next generation with the PS3 and the 360. These didn't generate nearly as much heat as it was then. So let's get this guy off. You can even see how they wanted air to flow through as they kind of oriented the fins to follow that airflow, which is pretty neat. So we're going to pull this up here, and we should get a nice look at everything inside, and we'll kind of take a look and see what we have going on here. So let's see if this will just kind of, you want to give a nice little slight rotation. You don't want to pull too hard on it. Nice little slight rotation. And there it is, it popped off. So here we go. We have everything here. Yes, they were using thermal pads. That's one of the reasons why this was on so tight. Thermal pads are known for that. So let's get these guys off. Thermal pad, this is still very malleable, which is good. That tells me that it's cooled well. It's hard for it to get to dry out when it's like that. Very cool. So we have a few things here. Let me just take a look over these and make sure we have everything in the right place like we should. So let's see what we have here. All right, so we do have quite a few chips here. I kind of went over the basic idea of what we're looking at. I'm also going to get you guys some close-up pictures of these chips because they actually have some pretty legible writing on each one. So the first thing we'll start with, I guess, is the IBM right here, the IBM the Superscaler out of order Gecko PowerPC CPU based on the 750CXE, which is great. 180 nanometer IBM 6-layer copper wire process. And then down from there we have Flipper, which is this massive chip here, which of course is in charge of what you see on the screen for the most part. It is the GPU, 162 megahertz from ATI, codenamed Flipper. It was capable of 9.4 gigaflops if we're kind of just measuring it on like raw performance. Think about what we talk about now in teraflops. Seriously, like 9 gigaflops. That's pretty good back then, to be honest. This was not a bad system when it came to visuals. In fact, if you look at some games like a Resident Evil 4 or a Metroid Prime, there are some things that this system was capable of that even the original Xbox was not capable of, which is pretty cool. RAM, we have two RAM chips up here, and it had 24 megabytes, so there's two 12 megabyte chips here. For SRAM main memory, and then there was also memory built in to Flipper, 3 megabytes. It's actually built in on board there, and overall, this was a pretty cool, like, compact design for the system. Keep in mind, guys, this is how small this board is, and you can probably go back and look at some of the games it was capable of. Things like, well, in this case, things like Rogue Squadron, which is one of my favorite games. I think it still holds up to this day. Was capable of, from a board this small. This board is still smaller than the redesigned PS2 Slim. So you see how small that is? So keep that in mind, how small this thing was. I understand why people want to make GameCube portables out of this little guy. Now, there's really not too much else to go over here. I'm not really planning on putting this back together because I mostly just wanted this for the first-party controller, the first-party AC adapter, all of which was included in first-party AV cables, although for what I'm going to be really doing, I'm not going to be using those too much after I'm done reviewing the product. Because it's going to be through HDMI, which is awesome. But in this case, the heatsink goes back on. Again, very, very nice heatsink. The fan, of course, would blow air through it, and basically, as air would be pulled or pushed through it, it would cool it. And good system overall, very cool. Let me know what you guys think about this, though, the GameCube itself internally. I'm very curious how you guys kind of see this, maybe as someone who's not as in tune with these things, or maybe who is, and you kind of want to maybe talk about it a little bit. And guys, that's it for the GameCube teardown. I hope you enjoyed this look. Hope maybe you learned something about the GameCube that is interesting to you. You know, check it out more online. Maybe even pick one up if you haven't yet. There's some good games there. Really, I mean, at the time, the PS2, the Xbox, and the GameCube, I think really defined 3D gaming further than what happened with Nintendo 64 just because of the sheer volume of games. Massive creativity back then, much more than there is today. So I recommend checking out all three, but do not sleep on the GameCube. Didn't sell as well as the other ones. It technically came in last place, even being outsold by the brand new Xbox at the time, but it had, I think, some of the best games of that generation, bar none. So make sure you check it out, guys. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. It really does help out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about the GameCube, the inside of it, maybe your memories of it, or just maybe your favorite games to help people who are getting into collecting and maybe want to pick up a GameCube so they know what to get. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.